So, chapter 10 of your textbook focuses on style and delivery. And so, let's go through a couple of the main points that have to do with that. Basically, this means we're in the realm of nonverbal communication. And this can be a little confusing because we're going to talk about a lot of things that have to do with still the sounds that you're making with your mouth through, speaking. But what nonverbal communication means is simply anything that is not the actual words, the content of the words that's being said. So anything that has to do with the way that they're said is nonverbal communication, even though, confusingly, it might seem like it would be verbal because it is, coming out of our mouths. So just keep that in mind. We break this down basically into two areas that we're going to focus on from this chapter: vocalics and body movements. And so you see a very kind of exaggerated example here of how this kind of thing can really impact the perception of, what somebody thinks you're saying, even if you're not actually speaking any words at all, right? That a yawn is typically seen as a sign of boredom, or that you're at least kind of not inspired by whatever you're listening to. You're getting tired. In reality, it may or may not actually have anything to do with, how good a job the speaker's doing or anything like that. But not great to see nonetheless when you are speaking to a group. So let's talk about vocalics, though. Volume, arguably the most important one. Basically, you want to try to not be too quiet and not be too loud. That's, of course, relative to the space in which you're speaking. So sometimes you really got to project. I've taught this class and other classes in one of the big classrooms in Yoakum before, where you really need to talk louder versus a small classroom. Speaking on video, make sure your audio levels are set in such a way that you're not getting distorted, but you also just want to make sure that you're not like whispering too. Pitch is it's a word that you hear about in music and in singing sometimes, but it certainly applies to speaking as well. And so in science terms, it's literally the sound frequency, whether it's low or high. And pitch is one of those things that you vary in order to express mood. So when people get really excited, their pitch tends to rise. And if they're trying to get really serious, or maybe they're kind of angry or sad, their pitch might get lower. Again, you want to shoot for a kind of even, consistent pitch, generally speaking, where if you want to emphasize something, you might change your pitch slightly to indicate a point of emphasis. Articulation, basically, you can see as a synonym for pronunciation. In this context, the book talks about this pen and mouth exercise that go ahead if you'd like to practice articulation of words, meaning sort of taking each syllable in a word and making sure it's very clearly enunciated. Sometimes you have to do this on the phone. You may have found when I spell my last name to people all the time, I have to try really hard to articulate the letters, because there's these letters in English that sound alike, and a lot of them show up in my name. So most people say when I say the S at the end of my name, it can very easily sound like an F if the connection isn't great. Pronunciation has to do with, not just the enunciation of sounds, but the way in which a word is supposed to sound according to general social conventions. The way that this comes up probably most importantly with speaking is that you want to make sure you know how to pronounce people's names. Most of the time, you can find some example online if you're citing somebody or if you're referring to somebody by name, where you can get an example of how it's said correctly. And even if, it's not an individual that's actually going to be in the audience in your speech in this class, obviously, it will enhance your credibility if you say names and you at least sound like you are saying them correctly and confidently, and it will diminish your credibility if you don't. You don't want to speak too fast. I tend to talk too fast sometimes, and especially when I'm working with this 5-minute time limit here. I'm really trying to make, I tend to be long-winded in videos, so trying to make them much more watchable in this way. But don't talk too fast, although it can be an indication